Good morning, everybody. My name is Manuela Moschella from the Scuola Normale Superiore, and I'm very delighted here today to have Dr. Aitor Erce. Dr. Aitor Erce is a research analyst for the European Development Investment, the European Investment Bank, and is an expert on issues related to the design of official assistance lending programs. Over the past 6 years, he has been the principal economist at the European Stability Mechanism. So, Dr. Erce, thank you very much for being with us today. We asked Dr. Erce to be with us today to make us create some clarity. As you all know, we are going through very lively discussions about what the ESM, the European Stability Mechanism, can do for Italy and other crisis-hit countries. The crisis I'm talking about is the coronavirus crisis. And so there is this ongoing discussion about what the ESM can do for Eurozone countries. Last night, we had a very long Eurozone leader meeting. We know that the meeting was inconclusive, and one of the main contentious issues was exactly about the role of the ESM in countries like Italy and Spain. So before getting to any conclusions, what we would like to do today with Dr. Erce is to start creating a compass to navigate these uncertain times. And so we would like, first of all, to know a little bit more about this important but pretty new European institution. So what I would like to ask Aitor in the first place is to give us some basics. So what is the ESM and why was it created?
Okay. Thank you, Manuela, for this invitation to speak today. I'm very glad that I'm capable of discussing a bit about these issues with you and maybe like trying to help your students and like those that may then listen this conversation to help clear a little bit or like clarify concepts as regards where we are and what can be done with the infrastructure that we have already set up at the Euro area level, right? And then like to start from scratch as you proposed, the European Stability Mechanism, which is now like in so many of the proposals and all of the discussions about how to manage the crisis, was created in 2012 in the middle of the debt crisis in the euro area that followed the global crisis. It was built because, as we may all recall, following the global crisis, many countries in Europe, they found themselves suffering very strong capital flights. And their private sectors and their governments, they didn't really have an ability to sustain the economy while all this capital was flying the countries, and they required support. The support initially was provided in the form of bilateral loans, of like a dedicated fund called the European Financial Stability Facility, which sounds very much like some of the ideas of the day today. But none of these bilateral loans or other ideas like actually provided a resolution to the crisis in Europe. So, in addition, with Mario Draghi's whatever it takes and like big moves by the ECB, the Euro area governments decided to set up a permanent bailout fund that would be in charge of providing financing to countries if they would ever go into crisis again. The critical thing of this initial design is that because there was a sense in which part of the problems that had been faced by Euro area countries had to do with a lack of an adequate economic structure and, as some saw it, the lack of fiscal discipline. The provision of these loans was originally envisaged to be done against conditionality, right? So countries, it was basically a scheme of cash for reform, as they like to call it at the ESM, right? So I don't know if you want me to
No, I have a question, Aitor. You said that when the ESM was created, of course, a crucial issue at the time was capital flight. You know, it was this big problem of market access. Currently, I think that we are not witnessing this kind of capital flight that we had back in 2010 and then 2012 when the ESM was created. So I think that many people watching this conversation will ask, okay, so why do we need the ESM right now?
I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to give you bad news. There was just yesterday, the data from the target system was out, latest data from the target system. Italy has suffered the largest capital flight in record in the last month.
Okay. So we need the assistance.
Over 100 billion in increased liabilities with target. Part of this is the result of all the bond buying by the ECB, don't take me wrong. But another part is not.
And so what's the part of the ESM?
The capital flight is already going on. The issue is this time monetary policy has been faster to react. The question remains whether we want this to be a situation in which the only game in town is the ECB, which has limited capacity to engineer maturity transformation, and it's not very clear for how long it's going to be able to deviate from the capital key as it is doing now in order to purchase a lot of Italian debt, because this is another data that has been already out. And like the purchases under the pandemic program are completely biased towards Spain, France, and Italy. But this cannot last for long. So, I mean, like, I agree that until now it's contained, okay? It's contained, but this is not really the solution we want. I mean, ideally, we would want to be able to finance the expenses from this pandemic at costs that are as cheap as possible.
Oh, and, absolutely.
150 basis point spread over Germany is the borrowing cost for Italy now on the 10. And I mean, I think that could be put down, should be put down. It would make everybody's life easier.
So let me get at your analysis, which are important at this stage. So I think you rightly stressed out that currently Italy and other Eurozone countries are enjoying the support of the ECB. But I completely agree with you that we cannot take this support to be to last forever, right? I think we are all aware of this problem. At the same time, Italy, Spain, France, all other Eurozone countries, we are spending, and we need to spend more to support people, to support our households, firms, to cope with this terrible crisis. So you recently published a series of analyses on what the ESM could do exactly. Can you spell out some extra details? And you were talking about the interest rates that Italy has to pay potentially on further bond issuance. Can you give us some further details about what exactly the ESM could do?
Yeah, of course. So I mean, like that. I think that the maybe useful way to think about managing public debt is to recognize that, I mean, like having a large debt stock can be problematic because of two reasons. Right? One is that it may generate very large interest payments. The second one is that because the debt stock is very large, you may need to issue new debt to replace the old debt, so what they call rollover in a technical way, a lot and very often. And this, every time that you need to go and ask your creditors whether they want to be your creditors for a little longer, they can always tell you no, right? And this generates what is called rollover risk, right? So, I mean, like going to the interest rate, right? As I mentioned, currently the Italian government is borrowing, I think it's a little bit like over 1% in the 10-year domain, right? Okay, I mean, like this is cheap. I mean, there is no doubt about that. But if it could be cheaper, the cumulative savings over years for a country like Italy, with the amount of debt it has, would be of tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions. And that is a lot of money, right? I mean, like currently, like really on the table for Italy, there are 50 billion in expenses. then there are guarantees. So what we stress is that, if one could use not only the ESM, but the European architecture as the ESM allows to, because ESM unlocks the capacity of the European Central Bank to open the OMT, the Outright Monetary Transactions Program, which is a targeted program on the countries which require OMT. This would amount to spread targeting. This would allow, on the one hand, this would allow the ECB to probably push further the borrowing cost for Italy. This would probably allow the Italian DMO to maybe shorten a little bit the issuance maturity, and this may reduce significantly the interest rate bill. Then there is the aspect of rolling over, right? The aspect that if you have a lot of debt and you need to refinance it, you need to go and ask for the confidence of your creditors all the time, right? But it turns out that the ESM, and in this, the ESM is very special. The ESM can perform maturity transformation through its balance sheet. On the one hand, the ESM can borrow very short. And in borrowing very short, because the ESM passes an interest rate that is a small margin over financing costs. So if the ESM would be borrowing these days on an average maturity of 1 year and a half, the interest payments on any loan by the ESM would be zero, literally. That's one beneficial aspect, again, because it may reduce the interest rate bill. But in our view, and as we saw in the analysis you mentioned, as important is the fact that the ESM, as it has done in other countries, can provide financing in very long maturities, right? So far, the debate is discussing maturities of 5 years. That gives some accommodation, but without the necessity to go to that extreme. The ESM has already provided Greece with loans with a 35-year maturity, right? So this would reduce enormously the amount of bonds that need to be issued in the market, because if the ESM provides 100 billion in a loan with a 15-year maturity, that position to be financed with 5-year bonds requires the issuance of 300 billion in bonds.
It's all sensible. It makes sense. We can see the technical details behind it. But of course, one prominent question in Italy, like in many other countries, regards the conditionality that you were talking about since the very beginning. So what kind of conditionality support from the ESM would entail, right, for a country? Also because in the newspaper this morning, in the Italian newspaper this morning, there was also this concern that once the OMT, the outright monetary transaction from the ECB will be available for Italy, for instance, this would also entail further conditionality. So what kind of conditionality do you envisage to be attached to the ESM support?
So, this is critical. This is completely critical in order to have any potential of backing by governments currently. The idea of having conditionality, like it was done in Greece, right, where the memorandum of understanding had 300 pages, most of which were literally useless. That is no solution. And we don't support that kind of solution. And I completely support the perspective of governments like the Italian one, that they don't want to go for that solution. But given the willingness of some countries in Northern Europe to play by the book that we have, there are ways to look into the book that allow for a concept of conditionality that has nothing to do with what our governments fear, right? There might be the political stigma of not having enough firepower at home that you need to resort to someone else. Right. But I don't know the extent to which that kind of a stigma is also going to bite with Corona bonds. But in any case, the ESM has a set of credit lines that haven't been used yet, which are called precautionary. Right. Fortunately for Europe, Italy blocked the reform of the ESM treaty. So the way that those facilities work is as follows. Right. There is one of them. It's called the ECCL. This facility allows access to funds without any exposed conditionality, different from the conditionality that already exists at the European level. What the ECCL means in terms of exposed conditionality is that the country that takes money through this facility should follow the recommendations if the country is in an excessive deficit procedure, should follow the recommendations if the country is in an excessive imbalances procedure. But I mean, let's be clear. I mean, like, this is something that we should be doing anyway, right? And if you want to put it bluntly, you can accept that. And there is no way they can force you, because we know how sanctions work in Europe. So how much of a bite that has? I mean, I think that the fear from politicians comes from maybe not really so much that the men in black are going to come and tell you what to do, but that they have to sell internally, that they cannot do it alone, and it's a matter of pride, I assume.
It's also, I mean, we are democracies, right? So, I mean, politicians respond to their electorates. But let me stress another point here, either, which I think it's important for our audience and for this objective that we have to make clarity. You mentioned Corona bonds, and there is a lot of discussion about alternative instruments, recovery bonds. There is the proposal from the European Commission to provide support for unemployment, funding coming from the European Investment Bank. And I'm going to try to show you the analysis that you did with your colleagues that have been recently published. Let's see if I can, because I would like to ask you the difference of having support from the ESM right now as compared to the alternatives, the policy alternatives that are under discussion. So if you can tell us briefly about the main differences of the policy options on the table.
From our perspective, the main reason why we consider that the ESM is an option to consider is because it's already part of the playbook, right? I mean, like, this is something that you can access, right? Like, using the rules with, we consider, which is a set of conditions that are non-conditions in an exposed sense, despite we understand all the political implications of the issue. So in our perspective, this is a solution that is literally there. You have money, and importantly, this is a solution in which there is capital for 700 billion to finance 500 billion in borrowing. There is an over provision of capital by like the strongest countries in Europe to make sure that this instrument is AAA, right? This is like having a joint and several warranty, right? And if you see these days, a lot of the discussion about like these Euro bonds, not bonds, should it be joint? Should it be several, right? Joint and several is the best protection you can have. Some countries these days are saying they won't agree to provide a joint warranty, right? I mean, if they would be ready to provide a joint and several warranty, there would be very little difference between providing the funding one way or the other. I mean, maybe in the sense of more liquidity for bonds that are already known by the market would imply maybe smaller borrowing cost. But other than that, with political will to provide a joint and several warranty, there would be no, I mean, like the differences would be on, probably you need to set a new market, you need to market the instrument. This would take a little bit more of time. Initially, the instruments would be less liquid because they are less known. There would be a novelty premium. So maybe initially they would be a bit more expensive, right? But I mean, like, if there would be political will to have a Eurobond running with a joint and several warranty, I mean, in a matter of months, probably they would be they would be observationally equivalent. I mean, the point is whether we want to agree on something that can really help us now, right? And then continue talking. Or we are not going to get this that can really help us now, because we think that we have to continue talking, right? And as some of our calculations show, right, if Spain, and I'm not gonna, because we've done the work also for Spain. I mean, if Spain would be to access a nice amount of funding through a combination of ESM and OMT, right? When the comparison of the savings on interest that would come from that alternative and financing all that money on the markets on current conditions that are sustainable. Don't take me wrong. This is not, we cannot do it. Of course we can do it. We are rich countries. The issue is how much it's going to cost us and whether we can save all that money for the reconstruction. And I think, our point is that, there is a margin of gain. I know that the Italian Treasury, the Italian DMO is one of the best DMOs in the world. Clear, literal, this is literal, and everybody can acknowledge this, right? But you see, why? There is a sense in which if you get a good agreement to just make their life easier, right? And in the meantime, having part of this financing with a nice long maturity that implies a very, very small adjustment on the primary balance to pay it off, that comes with 0 interest rates. I know we want more. I understand that we need more junior. We cannot be just like sovereigns without central banks, right? We are seeing this in practice. But this is the patch. We are considering that this is a patch that is going to help us today. And in helping us today, is going to help us helping ourselves tomorrow.
I think it's perfectly clear. We have to make sure that we understand what we have at hand today, and as you said, try to also to start planning for the future. And this is my last question, Aitor, and I know that making predictions is not just difficult, but quite hazardous these days, especially when we talk about Eurozone politics. But what do you think? What is going to be the solution in the short term?
I don't know. I'm hoping that I don't know if today or on Thursday or when they will announce a package that has sufficient amount to show that the ECB is not the only game in town, right? If there is no fiscal muscle and all the muscle is in Frankfurt, this is going to be hard because tensions are going to reemerge.
So let's hope that Eurozone leaders listen and they understand really the challenge of our time. And as you said, that a meaningful package of support come around quite quickly. And in the meantime, really, let me thank you once again on my behalf, on behalf of the Scuola Normale, and till soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you. It was great talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.